Good morning, everyone. We're here, some of us, and hopefully some others will join in a bit. Larry's, you have your mic off, but just to let you know. Okay. We have a number of topics today, and some of these initial ones are generated by Dane, and so I'm very glad he's here with us. The first one has to do with Atemi and Kempo. It says, while Kempo typically describes Okinawan karate and the later American version, it is also used to describe jujitsu containing striking, especially in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Jujitsu would be considered to contain Kempo, Torite, and Yawara, for example. Okay. And I guess we're talking about strikes.
Sounds like it.
The role of strikes. I mean, to me, Yawara is another word for technique, unless I've interpreted it wrong all these years. So I guess what you're looking, let me ask you a question, is what you are looking at is maybe the difference in striking between Kempo and Jujitsu, or explain yourself.
Yeah, so I guess where I'm coming from with it is I guess the more I learn different things and learn about different things, the more I learn that they're all exactly the same thing. They're not different things. And um I think a lot of times I think we circle around this a lot, that it being Japanese and not being a native Japanese speaker, we cling to words much more deeply, I think, than we should. And I think too, it was kind of in my mind, Kenpo is punching and kicking people, and jujitsu is throwing and choking people, that kind of thing. And it seems like the further back you go, the less distinctions there were. There was just things you do to opponents that are attacking you, and then different opponents attack you, so you do different things to them, right? So if somebody's wearing a t-shirt and they attack you, you can punch them in vital points and you can grab them and hold them and whatever. But if they come at you with armor, you're going to throw them and break their arm, right? But you're doing the same batch of things. You didn't only study throwing or only study punching. It was just, these are the things you can do with your body. You can use your hands and you can use your feet and you can do different things with them. And it seems like back in the old days, there was just a stuff you could do to people and responses you could have. And then you got good at one of them and branched off. So like somebody who is really exceptional at kicking people branched off and focused on kicking and started an art that was like a lot of kicking. But it's really still jujitsu. It's just this jujitsu guy focused on kicking. This jujitsu guy focused on wrist locks. This jujitsu guy focused on something else. And then it spread off. And that little branch became its own thing with branches. So you look at Aikido as being different than Judo, and you look at karate as being different than jujitsu. But I don't think they really are. And it's one of the things that got me on this is this book called Kenpo, Illustrated Instructor's Manual. And this is actually a jujitsu book. And it was a book that was from the late 1800s, originally for like police to use against assailants. And everything in it is like, how to get out of grabs and chokes and holds and all of these things. But they call it Kenpo. And in it, there are the strikes and the vital points and things, but they're just using that term very generally. And it kind of occurred to me, it's sort of like saying gym class. Like, what is gym class? It's anything you did in gym, right? So like soccer is gym class, football is gym class, jumping up and down is gym class, you know. So to just say I'm doing gym, I'm doing athletics is meaningless, right? And I think that's what jujitsu kind of means. I think it just sort of means you're doing like martial athletics, so to speak, you know? It's like an umbrella more than a specific thing. It means everything, not one thing, is what I'm kind of learning over time. So when you see karate, it might be people who over time have emphasized punching and kicking, but I think all the throws and things are there. They're just not focused. Then in jujitsu or even judo, the punches and kicks are there, but they're not focused on. The other stuff is. So it seems to me more like a focus and an emphasis, and what you're best at is what you think the art is, and then you run off with it. So that's kind of where I was coming from there. I know it's long-winded, but just the idea that one person calls it kenpo, one person calls it jujitsu, and they're the same thing, just you're different. The art isn't different, right? That kind of thing.
Okay, makes sense to me. There are two thoughts that come to mind for me. One, the name jujitsu itself says gentle art. So it doesn't really say like karate, which is, you know, striking with your hands, or aikido, spirit, you know, technique, or all these other names are specific names. The judo is an exception, gentle way. Aikido could be a gentle way. Karate could be a gentle way, depending on how you use it. I think the other thing I thought of is that as initially the martial arts training in Japan, China, where have you, was all encompassing, as you said, because I don't want to say they were warlike societies, but that was essential to survival. And as you become more civilized, you then can afford, I don't want to use the word, I'm going to use it improperly here, and I apologize. As you become more civilized, you become more specialized and more artsy. And so that's where judo came from, and aikido, and, you know, other martial arts, is, as you said, they had a specialty, and that is what they emphasized. And we do that here. You have different kinds of, you after high school, you've got different kinds of training, depending what occupation you want to go into. You have different colleges. You have different levels of degrees in college, and in the trades. It's pretty redundant. The concept that they're saying is pretty redundant throughout society.
Right.
And Dave or Larry, you want to throw anything else here in here?
I was surprised to find in some of my readings that jiu-jitsu for a time was referred to as yawara.
Yeah.
And to me, I didn't know that, and I read it more than one place, and I go, well, when I got two sources, I've got more confidence in it. But I've always thought of yawara as a kubotan, a short stick. And so that's, coming through the ranks, that's what it was. And here it's been generalized, just like Dane's saying. It makes a lot of sense. When I got my first black belt, it was in karate, and it occurred to me if I was ever going to use it, I was going to be probably hurting someone. And what attracted me to jiu-jitsu was the idea that could use this and not end up in court, maybe, if it ever needed to be used. It was intriguing. Plus, it was apparent art. So both of those drew me to karate. I got a little off stories there, but I won't go sideways. I'll just stay with the topic.
Okay.
I feel like the topic is sideways.
Second here, I'm still bleeding from my fall.
I think too, it's interesting that the secrets of a martial art like what is a secret to unlock the understanding of one martial art is what a second martial art openly teaches.
Yes.
And then what they are hiding is what the original martial art openly teaches. So, like, for instance, talking about karate, I have that same kind of thing throughout my life, you know, studying karate and the jujitsu aspects. Like, there's just not a lot of opportunity when somebody grabs your wrist to just start breaking their nose and collapsing their windpipe and, you know, hitting them on arteries and doing all these strikes and things. There seemed like there wasn't any other option, right? You're just punching and kicking for everything. And that's that saying, when the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. And when you teach people karate, you teach them that everything they're doing are punches and kicks. And then they learn to do the kata by punching and kicking against each other. And that gives them timing and distancing. And they can use it to do that. You can punch and kick people for sure. But if you really dig into the kata and you start pulling things out of it, it's jujitsu. The jujitsu applications are hidden within the kata. And the same is true of kung fu. So if you're learning tai chi or kung fu forms and they look like you're doing all of these really magnificent punching and striking things and your arms are all over and you have all these different poses that look really fancy stylized strikes, you apply the analysis of chin na on it, and now those exact same movements are wrist locking techniques. Like something that looks like a punch and a whatever is actually grabbing somebody and locking their arm, and what looks like you're stepping and turning is actually a hip throw. You know, you're actually stepping back and shifting your hip. You're not really walking by moving your feet like that. Like when you see karate guys fight, they don't do the shuffle step forward. That's a leg sweep. You know, that's a throw hidden within that. But if you just study jujitsu, you're doing hip throws on day one, right? But if you're doing karate, you need to be like a 10th degree black belt who's been training for 120 years. And then you see, if you ever see an Okinawan master, if you see the guys wearing red belts in Okinawa, it's like you're dealing with Ueshiba. They're just going to do wrist locks on you and throw you and roll you away, and everything's circular and all these things. And they're getting it from the karate techniques. But a beginner looks like a karate guy throwing these punches, huh, 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 you know, but the advanced guy knows that's grabbing somebody and pulling them back while you push them. You know, you're doing these other things. So what's a secret to pull out of karate techniques is just right there in judo and jujitsu. And like we talked about, I think part of this too is that some arts act like they don't have Atemi. I think that's part of this too, right? Like Aikido acts like if somebody's got their hand on your throat, you just, you know, give them a hug and move them like that, and then they fall down beautifully and roll away. And that is how you would demonstrate the cooperation of partners performing a technique, right? And that's all they're doing there. But if it's a real street confrontation or they're an army ranger or something and somebody grabs their throat, you still are using that Aikido technique, but it's going to involve like digging your thumbnail into the back of their hand and popping them on the nose and, you know, all those things to distract them and scare them and whatever. And you're going to yell at them, and all that other stuff is still there, but hidden in like Aikido. You act like that's not there when you're practicing, but then you need to put it in. So like the secret of Aikido is what karate guys do all day. Like run around yelling and punching, right? And then the secret of karate is throwing people gently using their body weight. You know, it's like, so that's where I'm coming from with those.
Okay. I mean, I've seen different styles of jujitsu that in one system certain techniques are secret, and in other systems they're, you know, they're taught to white belts. You know, there's what's called an absolute lack of consistency. At least I know in jujitsu. I know probably judo is more organized, and within each system brew of karate it's more organized, but jiu-jitsu is kind of wide open. And Hal Brocious taught techniques that I never learned from Seki. Now they both fit together beautifully because that's the nicety of the art of jujitsu. But yeah, it's amazing what's out there, what we don't know, that other systems consider legitimate and part of their training. And you don't, as you said, you don't run into some of that until you are a brown or black belt, and you can't even I mean, if you took a bunch of below brown belt jujitsu people and put them together on the mat, it would be total chaos. They wouldn't know what to do with each other. You get brown, and I've seen it happen, you get brown and black belts of different styles together. And once they get past differences in terminology in English and Japanese, and some variations in techniques, they can work out together beautifully. And I mean, that's a compliment to the art. But there are differences. I mean, and I mean, you know, like you said, karate people somewhere as once they get up there high in rank, they pick up these sweeps and some of the throws that you find in judo or jujitsu. They pick up some of, you know, and there's this cross play. I think that occurs in every martial art once you reach a certain skill level. And maybe part of that is because they're trying to give you down here at the base, they're trying to give you a particular foundation to work from. And that's the only thing I think of. But then again, that concept applies to anything you do in life.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you have to learn to walk before you run.
And I think with martial arts too, it's kind of like there's a bit of a Santa Claus, especially with karate specifically more than jujitsu. Because again, you know, jujitsu, you're doing jujitsu. Karate, you don't know what you're doing. Like the kata are completely ambiguous and they're made to be confusing and unknown. So you literally don't know what you're doing until you figure it out. And it's a different process. But I think it's kind of like Santa Claus. It's like the entire point of telling somebody about Santa Claus is to later have them figure out there isn't one. You know, it's like, I think kata does exactly that same thing. You're like, here is Santa Claus, here is Santa Claus. And then one day you look at it again and you're like, I think that's not Santa Claus, actually. I think that's a judo technique that I'm seeing here. You know?
That's interesting. Where does bunkai figure in what you're saying? My karate sensei early on, I pulled him aside and I said, it's pretty obvious, and I'm learning these forms. Pretty obvious, you know, what some kicks and what some punches do, but what are some of these circular movements and so forth and so on. And what he did was to go through the 13 forms I was learning up through second degree, although I never tested for second. I got distracted by a really good martial art called jujitsu. Anyways, I had him go through and share with me the specifics on each. So as he actually demonstrated the kata, movement by movement, he would say, and now this is happening, and my opponents are doing this, and I'm doing this, and then so I ended up with maybe not a thorough, but a much better understanding, and I ended up including it in my book, my comprehensive book that includes those 13 forms, to know what the bunkai is and why I'm moving the way I'm moving. When I do it in my driveway, which is the only comfortable place to do it on my property, I tear up the lawn. If I do it in back, my neighbors think I'm insane. I just warn them, look, you know, this is a form of mental illness, but it's peaceful. So don't worry about me when I'm in the driveway doing 13 forms. Nevertheless, the bunkai, it would seem to me, negates the point you're making. So help me understand, please.
So bunkai is an interesting thing. There's layers of it, and there isn't a single one. That is something that's not taught, not for real. So bunkai is basically like, so kata in essence are a Zen koan. They're like an ink blot. They're a thing for you to look at and ponder and come up with your own revelations about what the technique is. So there isn't like an actual one technique that's hidden in the kata that ultimately everyone agrees on and they're waiting for you to figure it out. And then they're like, yes, you're right. Once you figure out what the kata is, everyone else will tell you you're wrong. And then they'll tell you what they figured out. So there isn't like this one authority that'll be like, yes, you guys finally got it. That is this. That
Okay.
doesn't happen. So
Okay.
it comes down to what that individual has figured out throughout life. Now, the bunkai they do tell you and do agree upon is not really bunkai. It's actually like a performance learning tool, like a mnemonic device almost. So like if you're doing I'm sure one of the 13 you did is a pinan or a heian. So if you're doing like one of those kata where you're turning to the left, you dispatch an opponent, you turn to the right, you dispatch an opponent, you turn to the front, and now you got to fight this guy walking towards him, and then you turn and fight the next guy. When you're being taught that so that you memorize the movements and so you perform it with a certain cadence, say, what they're really saying is do it like this is happening, which is different than saying this is what's happening. So what you tell a white belt is look to your left because you're looking to see if there's an opponent there. Like look to your left as if you're looking for an opponent. This is because they want you to look sharply. And then they'll say, now step to your left like you're blocking a kick to your groin. And that gives you this like intense power to go that way. Now step forward and punch like you're punching this guy in the solar plexus. And that's telling you how to perform the movements. And that's how you learn the kata. But then when you're doing it over years and years, you start thinking, well, wait, if somebody's trying to kick me to my side, why wouldn't I just not get hit by it? Like, why am I stepping towards it to block it? If I have to step towards it to block it, it's not going to hit me. Why would I block it? Right? But if somebody grabbed your wrist and now you're turning your body sideways relative to them, and then you grab their wrist and now you step forward and break their elbow rather than punch them in the solar plexus. So now you're not blocking a kick and punching them. You're grabbing the hand that was grabbing you and then putting your arm under it. See what I'm saying? Like,
right.
And so there's that level of thinking of it, or like one where you're facing somebody, then the next thing you do is put your hand on your shoulder and turn 90 degrees and do a down block. Visualize, instead of your hand on your shoulder, you're grabbing somebody else's shoulder behind you. And now just turn, and you're just throwing them over your hip as you turn. So there's those things, and those are the little secrets in the kata that you don't want to tell somebody, because then there's no reason to study the kata and there's no reason to even do them. You would just say, well, let me learn these hip throws. Let me just pull these techniques out and just do those. But part of karate is developing, I think, your mental ability to visualize those things and pull things out of it. And like we were saying, it's secret, right? Because karate went into the schools in Okinawa. They started teaching it to children in 1900. So it went from being this very secret thing that people did in their backyard privately to now every student, every child in Okinawa is being exposed to it. So you don't just want to show them all the good stuff right away. They have to prove themselves and they have to whatever. And it became a physical exercise. Like, you don't need to know what all of those techniques are to have your upper body get strong from practicing them. And that was kind of their goal, was this is better than gymnastics, it's better than aerobics, it's better than sports. Have them do this. And it also instills a military spirit. It gives them confidence. It doesn't matter that they don't know what the techniques are for. You're going to give them a gun and a bayonet. Like, they don't need that. So what they need is good physical conditioning and good mental spirit. And then the actual use of karate fell by the wayside. And the masters who knew the secrets died in World War II. So then you were left only with the school children who learned school child karate, who then just kept teaching it the way they learned it. So that what are you actually doing just became people making stuff up on the spot. Oh, well, what's happening here is I'm being surrounded by 3 people, or like Naihanchi, you'll hear a lot, or Teki, depending on where you are, you'll hear a lot. That is a kata that moves side to side in a horse stance. And you'll hear people say, well, that is because a master was in a fight where his back was against a wall and he had to fight 3 people. There was people on each of his sides and one in front of him. So he fought this guy, he fought this guy, and he fought this guy. And that's just silly. That's just telling you, when you're performing it, perform it as though your back is against a wall, meaning keep your back straight, keep yourself, that kind of thing. Or they said it was from a rice paddy. It's from fighting in rice paddies. It's like, that is the most absurd thing you could believe, right? But the idea is your feet are behind the rows of rice or whatever, and so you have to move sideways. But what they're really saying is, when you do it, envision that your feet are stuck in something where you have to move side to side, that kind of thing. But then, an American soldier learns that in the 60s, and the broken English, what they heard was, this is for fighting in rice paddies. This is for fighting against a wall. Pasai is for fighting at nighttime, all that stuff. But what the sensei really said was, do this movement like you're a blind man trying to feel. Do this movement like it's nighttime and you're trying to feel around. Then they bring it back to America and tell their students, this is so you can fight in the nighttime and feel your opponent and all that stuff. So that's where that comes in. Really long answer, sorry.
No, that's I took a page full of notes there, Dane.
Let me interject here.
Because what I noticed about the karate bunkai is that it's definitely kick and punch focused. Then not all the kicks are, of course, or the punches are linear. I mean, there's axe kicks, there's crescent kicks, and certainly physical. But I really didn't get a good handle on Tai Sabaki and the whole concept of don't be there until I studied jiu-jitsu. And I really like the whole don't be there. It goes hand in hand with the finest expression of a martial artist, to never have to use it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let me get one cent in here, and Larry's been sitting patiently, taking all this in. Any thoughts from you, Larry?
No, I'm just I'm leaving the philosophizing to you guys, right?
Larry, I was going to suggest that if you use sharp words, you could fit them in edgewise.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff hidden, as you said, Dane and Dave. There's a lot of stuff hidden in the martial arts. I think I hate to say you find the same thing in any profession. The knowledge just isn't out there. You've got to go. If you're going to be good at what you do, you have to go find those things that will help you be good at what you do. And that's a hard concept for some people to think, because I've had kids, in high school or junior high, if I do this, will I get an A? And then they say, well, so-and-so did something different and they got an A. And I said, well, they learned the same thing you did, just differently. And that's a hard thing for people to understand. How do you say it? And a phrase I use a lot, and it's been in my book, probably all my books. There are different paths up the mountain, and hopefully while you're going up the mountain, different people will help you climb that mountain. And maybe it's, it all says the same thing. In law enforcement, there aren't too many different ways to enforce a law, but there are different ways to get people to react. And based upon your experience, maybe your upbringing, other, socioeconomic factors, whatever, race, that all those things will go into how you treat another person. And sometimes you get in hot water for it. And sometimes people will say you did a fantastic job. It's all very, and Larry has used this phrase, it's all very situational. I mean, I've actually told kids, I've used, in some situations, I've used, an occasional obscenity. And the kids knew me well enough to, or that they didn't take it as a personal offense. But you say that to someone out on the street who doesn't know you, you get your teeth knocked out. It's situational. The same thing I think occurs with the martial arts. You have, or anything else, you have opportunities, and sometimes the brain cells connect and you have a revelation, and it's all of a sudden life is simpler. It's like right now, my thought pattern is I'm trying to find, I've said there are like 30, 40 basic moves in jiu-jitsu, which I really think that's all there is, in spite of the 870 techniques I have in the Densho. And I'm still trying to figure out what those commonalities are, because I hope maybe that if I can understand what they are, that I can relay the same concept to some of my upper rank students, and they in turn, as you said, will teach it to their students, and it works its way down the food chain, for lack of a better phrase, and eventually it becomes common knowledge. The other side of the coin is if they learn just these commonalities, what does that do to the 870 techniques in the Densho?
And I think that's the reverse process of karate.
Because
you want to go from, in karate, you're going the other way, where
right.
You're trying to figure out what's going on. And here you have all this stuff. I think that you're learning 870 techniques, and then the revelation is there's only 20. And I think you need to learn the 800 techniques to learn that there's only 20 ultimately.
Right.
Like I learned that at one point, like all these little wrist blocks and all of these things. It's like, wait, I'm just turning your arm.
Right.
Like that's the technique, is turn their arm. You know what I mean? Like once you get down to it, like, well, how do I turn their arm? Do I turn it like this? How fast? Once you don't have those questions, that's where you need 800 arm bars to be like, you could do it like this, you can do it like this, you can bend their arm, you can bend, blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, you're just like, I don't know, I'm just going to turn his arm. Like, and however I turn it is going to be a thing, is a thing.
For years, I told my students a hand throw is the exact same, kote gaish is the same thing as a wrist block takedown, is the same thing as a key turn, is the same thing as twisting the ankle. It's all the same movement.
Right.
And we call and in jiu-jitsu, I don't know, other ones, we have probably 24 different terms on how it's done based on little variations. But the concept technique is you're taking an extremity, the furthest extremity from the body. So this is you hate to say this is a child joint, but this is a child joint. For example, shoulder or neck is a parent joint because it connects to the torso. Okay, but you take the child joint, or the joint furthest away from the parent joint or torso, and that's what you use to control the movement of the torso. And it's the same concept. And I'm sure it applies in different martial arts, and each of these different things is given a different name. But if the student recognizes they're all doing the same thing, does it really matter what it's called? And I don't know what to call it, all these things.
Right.
do we call it
Because
a
ultimately you don't need to. You don't need to call them anything.
right?
It's
Right,
you just know if I do this, it's blocks like that and that.
right. You don't need to call it anything, and then people want to know what you're doing,
And that's a huge part of karate too. That it's both how karate got so popular and why nobody actually knows karate that knows karate. Because you had to name everything. Originally, there weren't. So the way karate's taught now is you take a group of kids and you show them these punches, these blocks. You show them those things. This is this block. This is this block. It's got a name. It's got a name. It's done like this. This punch. Then you show them a kata, and the kata to them now looks like it's a collection of those movements, but it's actually the exact opposite. The kata is one movement. It's the kata. From start to finish is the kata. To extract a single moment of it is just physical exercise. You're practicing. It's like if I was teaching my daughter to brush her teeth by having her do this 20 times. Like that in and of itself is not something. What I want her to do is take the toothbrush and brush her teeth and then put it back, right? But like to get that, I'm trying to teach her elbow strength. That's all, right? But now she thinks when I brush my teeth, I do this 20 times and this is the first movement. No, you're not snapping your elbow enough when you brush your teeth. They're not learning that it was just a way to get you to be able to do the kata, right? So the kata itself, like one movement is actually this whole section where you do this thing. It's not, this is one thing, this is one thing, this is one thing. And, the pulling it out kind of ruined your ability to figure it out. So like you're saying, like if you start teaching just this little wrist block, they can't intuitively know that ripples through the arm and shoulder and torso and that you can, that's not intuitive yet until they've learned all these little things and put them together. And it's like the opposite in kata. By pulling all those little things out, it's obscured what they're really doing.
Well, that's why in Passover I've really changed where I would say right at the outset, white belts, I tell them, when you do this, I want you to do this slowly so that you feel the child joints tightening up. And this is what you are actually doing. And that seems to help them understand how a technique works and understand, the other joints, how to make, how do you say, once they get the concept, parent joints and child joints, and maybe the XYZ axes, which is a little more complicated. Once they get that, they begin to understand how techniques work. And so that's what I tend to, I'm very repetitious with this. And I think they get it by osmosis, if nothing else. But, that to me is an extremely important concept in any martial art, because once you understand how the body moves and how to make the body move, you've won. And just to mention one thing, I do want to thank you, Dane, because while you were talking, I had a revelation, because Seki had an incredible amount of generic terminology. He'd do a technique and someone would say, "What is it?" He'd say, "Oh, Tenagi." And in the Nensho, there are, I know because I did a search, there are 39 Tenagi, 39 different ways to do it. Okay. They're all Tenagi. They all do the same thing in one form or another. Okay. And maybe, I don't know, maybe Seki was just trying to get us to understand that, it doesn't matter how you do it, it's still a Tenagi. Okay. It doesn't matter how you do a winding throw, it's still a makikomi. Okay. Which means to wind. And so maybe that's why he did it, because he wanted us to understand that as long as you understand the concept of the technique, that's all that really matters. and you don't need to give every different version of the Teinagi. You don't need 39 different names. Okay, and because all the names can be it's like learning a foreign language. It is. And
Yep.
it's in every martial art, and it do you learn the physical aspect of the martial arts, or do you learn all the terminology names? I mean, ultimately, the idea is to learn both, but there has to be a reality check. There has to be, a meeting in the middle, so to speak. It's like when we were having the restoration of the house, and they noticed that one of the front screen door was a little loose. So the project manager says, "I'll just get a longer screw and put it in for the shortest screw, and that'll solve the problem." He didn't say, "Well, there's a 1-inch screw in there now. I think it would do better with a 2-inch screw with a such and such thread, with this type, with a Phillips head or whatever other kind of head on this." He's not going to go, "I'm going to get a bigger screw." Okay, and this is the same thing. A screw does what a screw does. Pour it out. A screw does what a screw does as long as it fits. So a Teinagi does what a Teinagi does as long as it fits. Maybe it's a bad analogy, but life goes on. Anyway, so let's see what else we can do with Atemi here. Now we did say that, and I think today's conversation is going to be just on Atemi, which is okay. Distraction is step number 1 of a complete jujitsu technique, and this is all through within Atemi. And distraction, a striking distraction. The intent is to distract. And striking, it can mean a hit, can mean a kick. It can be taking your finger and tweaking someone's ear or their nose. It doesn't matter. It's something to take, or you can break their nose for a palm strike. It's to take their mind off of what you really want to do. Sort of like a feint, and I'm sure F-E-I-N-T, not F-A-I-N-T. It's a feint to distract your opponent, to give you maybe a fraction of a second additional time. And that's the intent. That's the intent of some of the blocking. Again, I know in karate, every block has a different name. For Seki, it was a block. He showed all sorts of different kinds of blocks. We learned them as you block. And it was that simple for him. And again, I don't know whether it's because he didn't know the names of the blocks, but he realized all these names are really irrelevant as long as you learn the skill. It's like brushing the teeth. Once you learn how to brush your teeth, it doesn't matter what all these little different, and there are different ways of doing it. Okay. But anyway, so what am I trying to say here? The distraction, that's the intent of a distraction. And last Tuesday, I was teaching for someone reaching out with you both hands. And the first time I showed it, I blocked their arms out. And then I took a step in and pushed against this part and this part of their chest, which is where you should be pushing against their body to knock them backwards. You push down here, it's not going to work that well. But if you put your whole body behind it, just come in with a quick palm strike at both these points, it's going to knock a person backwards. Okay, and that was the strike. And then the second and third time, I didn't even bother with the block. I just struck. And they said, "Well, why didn't you block?" I said, "Because a block if you want to block, fine, but it's not necessary to getting into the person, because they're reaching like this. All you have to do is be inside of their outreached arms. And the hardest thing to get them to do was simply to do that strike. I said, you can do this full first. You can do this full force. You're not going to hurt the person. It won't hurt a person. It just knocks them backwards. Now, if they hurt themselves when they fall, that's something else. But that's it's like if you strike a person in the nose or backhand the side of their ribs, if it cracks their ribs, that's what happens. That's ideally what the technique should do. That's what a distraction ideally should do. Okay, a block should ideally, we do a lot of ideally. If you do it, odds are this is what's going to happen. No guarantees, but odds are this is what's going to happen, because that's how the human body moves. And what point am I trying to make here? So anyway, the distraction serves is the intent of a strike, or even if it's something as innocuous as I tend to look through people's eyes, which I know from experience drives them nuts, and they have a tendency to turn to look to see what's behind them, because it looks like I'm looking behind them. That in and of itself is a distraction. And people don't like that. They don't like it when you look through their eyes, because they don't know what you're looking at. And you're not looking at anything. So all of these are distraction, and Atemi is a very effective distraction in jiu-jitsu. And if it injures the person, it injures the person. That's not your intent, however. That's this area, even if you are not shown the distraction strike, it's implied in modern jiu-jitsu. Largely amidst Atemi, it's in polite practice. Yeah, and when we brought this up, they're going through these moves, distraction, but they can also be said, if the person's reaching for you and you block across, there's nothing that prevents you from coming back with a backhand strike to their face or to their ribs. Okay, it's all a very smooth, it should be in any martial art, a smooth flowing movement. And that's what a distraction, that's what to me, that's what Atemi is. It's a distraction, usually with your hand. There's a hand strike, but a hand strike can mean many things. Even as Hal Brocious would say, maybe sticking your finger up their nose.
Yeah,
you do that.
Sure.
You do that with force. That's going.
There's a lot of those hand formations you see in like kung fu and old karate books. There's all these different clawing and grabbing and ripping things, and people think it's for like grabbing their arms and ripping for some reason. But it's for sticking your finger in their mouth. And
he taught us how to stick it. He taught, if you're teaching women self-defense, this is how a woman, if the guy's coming in to kiss her, she can play the game, and then the last one just takes her thumb, sticks her side of the thing, and all of a sudden he looks like the Joker. There are, and you don't find that being taught in too many jiu-jitsu styles today. Part of it's it's not socially acceptable. But I think Larry, and I don't know if law enforcement, and I'm not saying this negatively, law enforcement, not the law enforcement people themselves for the most part, but some of the people they encounter do a lot of socially unacceptable striking and hitting and fighting techniques. And I know there's a little snicker appearing on Larry's face.
Okay. Oh yeah, it's amazing what they do in the prison system. So and that's one of the flaws I see in a lot of the martial arts training is the attacks are so staged that it really real life doesn't happen that way. If you're likely to encounter someone with a knife, you're likely to encounter someone with a lot of experience in custody and things like this, and they'll take, it's really amazing. They'll take they're not using nice knives like you would think. They're using toothbrushes that have been melted down and put into a pencil sharpener, and they're using homemade weapons and shanks and things like this. And what they do, the videos are out there. You can find them on YouTube, I'm sure. But the training videos of what they do in prison are amazing. They'll take a small little aerobics type of weight or something, and they don't even have those weights in the prison. So they use makeshift type of things. But if you were to imagine taking a 5 pound little weight you'd associate with an aerobics class, and they'll take that and just do this motion, kind of a stabbing motion in close. It's a very limited range. And what it does is builds up that muscle memory and that strength and that speed within, just for that technique, with the idea that we're going to have a distraction over here. I'm going to break through your personal space and your personal defense and get in close and just jam you, a million times. And then at the end with a makeshift shank, makeshift homemade knife. And then after I kind of taken like if you take a piece of paper and punch a pencil through it, and you have all these holes. And then at the end, you do a half moon crescent to just do as much damage as possible. And they'll do that, super fast, super violent, while no one's expecting. So when I talk about this to people, I say, what are you doing? What do people do to break down those defenses? And you think it's the common things. The parolees and the predators, they're gonna get close to you. And we don't like to, we're taught to be polite to people. We're not taught to be rude. So what they do is they'll ask you what time it is. And as they ask you what time it is, what does everyone do? They go to their watch or their cell phone now. No one should be asking you what time it is, period, these days, right? Everyone has a cell phone. They know what time it is. No one should be doing that, but they do that to break down those defenses. And what do? You put your head down, you look at your watch, you look at your iPhone, and now your focus is here. And as they do that, they come in tight and they grab that hand and they'll distract you. It'll go to a takedown, it'll go to a strike, it'll go to a multiple stabbing if that's the intent. So they'll do those things. It can be as simple as borrowing a pen. And I'll do this to in my classes. I'll have a bunch of students sitting there, and I'll ask them a random question that they're not expecting, but because they're trained, in society, we're taught to be nice to people. There'll be someone there with their cell phone. Hey, can I see your cell phone? And they'll be like, and they'll hand me their cell phone. I have no business having any access to that cell phone, but they'll hand it to me. And as they do that, they kind of look down, they're a little disheveled, like, well, that was an off question, but they're going to give it to me anyway. And they hand me that cell phone. And when they did, people hand things with their strong hand. So, if you have a weapon on you, well, now that's taken away because you have their strong hand. If you're going to throw a technique, you're going to favor your strong side. So that's taken away. And now what did you do? You gave me your strong hand to control and take you down with. And now the blitz kind of effect is already there, but you practice it. It's fun. So, you can do the same thing with a pen, or if you're handing someone back their ID, what I would do when I was dealing with parolees all the time, and just the street predatory element, right? I'd have them back their ID or a pen or whatever the case, and I go to give it back to them, and I give it to them with my strong hand, and they know it's my strong hand because if I'm in uniform, they clearly see, where my gun is and my badges, and I go to hand it to them, and with the idea that if they're going to make a move and lunge to me, they're going to commit, and when that commit comes, it'll pass me by if I totally just change hands. And my whole body changes. So I go to hand them their ID back, and I would do this and just as a matter of habit. It became fun. I go to hand them their back. I give them my strong hand, and as they're reaching out to grab it, I'd pull my hand back. I'd switch hands, and I give it to them my left hand, which changes their trajectory and their trajectory. Right, changes everything. Their projection comes forward. Now, if they're going to lunge for my gun or go for the hand, it's no longer there. And as they lunge, they're off balance, and I'm completely off balance. So then it's a simple move from there. So, but they've overcommitted. They'll overcommit. So when you do this, and I would go to bars, I go to, give the ID to the bouncer. I do the same thing to him, right? And they're looking at a million other things. They're not paying attention. They think my ID is here, and then it's over here. And they're like, and it's fun to watch them get frustrated. So, you could do just little things like that, changes that, and it takes the momentum away. It really takes that momentum of an attack away from you, and then you don't have to do anything, right? So you're avoiding the situation entirely, and then if you need to, then you can sweep them down and kind of push them away and just get out of there, and without so you're minimizing your exposure to injury, if you will. So And it's just little things, just the body motion. It's in that, and that's that's the whole of it, right? So when you're dealing with the criminal element, it becomes a whole nother animal. It's a whole different game. So yeah, I think I took us a little off track there. Sorry about that.
No, you're not off track. And I've run into it in numerous situations on the street where someone has asked me, you can train your students to avoid the situation that Larry has mentioned. It does take training and really awareness. If someone asks for something from me, I still occasionally will hand it to them with my left hand, which is my strong hand. But more often than not, I'll do a switch. Someone asks me the time. Most of us know about what time it is. We don't need to look at our watches. Okay, we can simply say, oh, it's about 10:15. And that's what I've done. I've had people approach me on the street saying, what time is it? And it may be completely innocent on their part, but maybe my paranoia is this, or I'll simply say, what's about 10:15? And that's all they get. I'm not going to,
And that note, if I do have to, if I do, look at my watch, I don't look down at my watch, and it takes practice because you look down at your watch, right? And you don't think anything of it. Normal people in society, they don't think anything. They look at their watch. Bring your watch up. Bring your watch up, and now you can see your watch here, but your hand is already in a defensive position, and then you got your peripheral, so you can still see something coming. And even if I'm handing something, I'm giving something to somebody, you know what? My hand is up. My hands are up because whatever it is I'm holding, it can drop, and I can deal with that later. My hands are already protecting the computer, so protecting the head. So they're in a position where at least I can do something. It may not be a formal karate block, but you know what? Concept is the same. And it's deflecting a block coming to do any significant damage. So those are the little things that when I tell people this stuff, that's kind of what I focus on, because someone's got to get close to you. They got to break down those external defenses. And how do the criminals do that? How do the predatory criminals do that? They got to break down those defenses and get into your personal space. And that's some of the things that they do. And I've seen them do this, so that that's why I know it so well, because I've been subject to it as a young in the career, working in the jails and with the inmates and things like this. That's some of what I was exposed to. So touche. I learned from you, and they don't realize that they're giving you a world of education, right? Could I have gotten hurt? Probably. That wasn't the intent, though. So yeah, but you learn these things as you go, right? And sometimes you learn the hard way. So especially me. So what can I say?
Yeah, I think we as instructors have a responsibility. We teach our art, okay, but we also have a responsibility to teach, I guess, what you call preventive self-defense, or not, I say non-violent, non whatever you want to call it, non-confrontational self-defense, whatever term you want to call it. And all of this is, as Larry said, is to keep people out of your personal space. I've been doing, I tell students, eventually your tachi waza, your ready position, will be your normal stance in society. Okay. If I'm in church, I feel very uncomfortable if both my feet, I'm standing with both my feet straight across. I always have one foot in front of the other. It's just habit. And these things, and nobody can really tell. I just don't feel comfortable in flat-footed position, because I know before I can do anything, I really have, or prevent myself from being pushed forward or backwards and falling, I have to take a step so that my body is balanced. And the same thing occurs for all this other stuff. People do something, they leave their cell phones in their cars, or other stuff out of, I've seen people leave laptops in the front seat of their cars. It's just, on the one hand, you can say it's stupidity. On the other hand, it's just a habit that has to be retaught. It's like, you can say the same, Some people leave guns lying around the house. Whereas, common sense dictates that gun should have a lock on it, or it should be in a gun safe, or particularly if there are kids in the house. All the other things should be in play, and it should be a habit. But some people don't get the concept until something happens to them. I say, I have a fanny pack, okay, hunky-dory, okay. It has a steel wire that goes through the belt part. That's how it was manufactured. So if someone comes up behind you with a real sharp, I won't even say knife, you're going to use a, I forget what the name of the tool is. It's an arched blade. It's used to cut asbestos on roofs. And those can be really sharpened. And all you do is come up behind a person and hook it onto the strap, and that cuts the strap, and off they go. But that little steel cable messes up the concept, okay? And you don't want to have to think that way. But my thinking is that if you do some of these preventive things and make it a habit, you don't have to think about it. And no, I'm not paranoid. Okay. But I always lock the door when I leave the house. I lock my car when I leave my car. It's just, and this is part of our responsibility as martial artists. What students are learning is developing a habit. Whether Atemi, waza, or ju-jitsu, or aikido, when they're learning how to do certain things. And we as sensei have to be able to extend that to, if we're teaching them personal self-defense, we also have to teach them this other stuff to reduce their chances of becoming a victim. I'll say to people, if you're walking down the streets and you've got a wide sidewalk, walk down the middle of the sidewalk. Don't walk close to the buildings. Don't walk close to the cars. If you're walking down a street, you're not sure of the neighborhood, walk down the sidewalk where the cars are facing you, so you can see what's in the cars. If you have to, this is not paranoia. It's only one noia. No, but it's a matter of training a person to be aware and reduce their chances of being a victim. You learn this. You learn certain skills in the military to keep yourself alive that have nothing to do with the use of whatever weapons you have. Okay, the same thing should be occurring in the martial arts. I know the same thing occurs in law enforcement to some extent, and yet, and also street training is a tremendous learning experience. And I know Larry can attest to that. Because the street, we as sensei can deal with all sorts of ideal situations, but the street is where things are real, and you don't get second chances on the street. And that's what a lot of students don't realize. Go ahead, say it, Larry.
Oh yeah, no, I agree 100%. So it's a situational awareness is what you start. You started talking about it at first there, and my head is always kind of on a swivel. It doesn't mean I'm paranoid. It's just it becomes habit. You're always paying attention to who's coming, who's going. If I'm walking on the street and I hear people, I sense people come behind me. I won't turn around and jump and look at them. There's no reason to do that, but I'll certainly use the reflection in mirrors and windows and things like that, be it a car, being a storefront, to kind of get a feel of who's coming up behind me. And if they're coming up quick, I'll step to the side. As I'm feeling them coming up, quicker and quicker, I'll just kind of suddenly sidestep to the side and let them go by. Go. You're in a rush. You're in a rush. I don't want to get in your way. Go ahead. And people don't expect that. And so these criminals, they're not stupid. People think, oh, you're a high school dropout. or I finished school in 8th grade. That doesn't mean that they're stupid. They may not be educated, but they're not stupid. They're very smart, and they're experts at reading human behavior. And so if you're within that baseline of what their victim, what a prey victim is going to be doing, they're going to expect you. They've already played this out in their head. They've already visualized this. And when you do something off of baseline, when you kind of switch that you startle them, and they'll abandon that. You'll see it happen. It's actually, you'll see it happening. And it's kind of funny when you watch it, right, when you do it. But they're used to that kind of baseline. The techniques, you can't try a technique once and then, didn't work. And that's one thing that we always trained at when we were training. If a technique doesn't work one time, flow into something else. Boom. You got to go into something else. You can't redo that because you're going to react like you're training in the real world. And so if I go to do a shoulder throw or whatever the case, and I missed it, my balance, my timing was off, or my opponent, dropped the weight and it changed the entire technique, don't go back and reset and do it again. No. We'll get that next, right? We can work that through the next time. But the idea is to deal with what happened to you, because that's what's going to happen in reality. So now you got to roll around that person or flow around that person and go to a completely different technique based on not what you did or what you memorized, the techniques you memorized, because it's not going to be the same. If they drop their weight and they step backwards, well, you know what? You've got to, their motion is going backwards. Now you need to do something. You need to turn and flow off of that. And maybe it's a foot sweep. Maybe it's a completely different technique. When I was in the field, I would do this, regularly. It wasn't an issue of whether you're going down or not, that was going to happen. But it was, you're going to go down in a manner that I wanted to position myself with my back to, to the sidewalk, not to the street, not to the angry crowd, not to the other parties that were there. So it was, and that's really where it became, where you started this, where the light bulb really started going off. Because if I pull your hand this way, to set up a technique that you're going to pull your hand back, then I can go to a throw or a takedown that's going to put my back against the wall, and then I can still not only deal with you effectively, but deal with anyone else that may be coming up behind me. So so those are the techniques that the situations you find yourself in, and then the thinking that you do. Okay, how am I going to get this guy to go here so I'm in a better position, for additional threats that may emerge. So those are the kind of things that you do, and you train this way, but it becomes consistent. What we do, what we did in the military, you always have a contingency plan. If this doesn't, this is our plan, and great. And when everything goes to hell, that plan is going to go out the window real fast. Murphy's Law is going to kick in, and I have to have my contingency plan, my plan A, plan B, plan C. So you have to make contingencies for that. You have to plan for that. And then again, and from military to law enforcement is really no different. But then that's how you go about your professional business, whether it's in whatever career path you're following. You always have a plan B, plan C. Then when something goes wrong, people don't panic. They just adjust, and they succeed under times of stress because they're used to adapting to the situation as it evolves.
Okay. Forgot what I was originally going to say now. I think essentially another thing we need to look, since we've segued into, how do you call it, non-confrontational self-defense. If it's very valuable for your students to learn how to read body language. If you're walking down the street constantly looking around, what's going on, that's a good signal that you're a good victim, surprisingly, because it means that you're very nervous and apprehensive. And there are other signals that a well-trained criminal will look at. And I first picked up this term back in the 1980s when I did a arresting control course or state of the term university UCSQ came up, which Larry has probably heard. I would think the University of California, San Quentin. It's amazing what skill, if you're with a certain group of people, it's amazing what you learn from them. Doesn't matter, good and bad. And there is a and this is when a lot of police agencies were still using revolvers rather than semi-automatic handguns. And I don't know if Larry's familiar with the term. There used to be the UCSQ. Some of the students there developed a concept known as the grasshopper roll. And in case you don't know what that is, as if a person points a revolver at you and you're within 20 feet and they fire off their first shot, and most law enforcement people were taught to shoot to the upper torso and head back at that time, or even the torso, upper torso. It took, by the time they fired their first shot, before they could fire their second, you could kind of like do a semi-arc roll, forward roll somersault, and be up to the officer before they could fire a second shot. And so one of the things they were starting to do with law enforcement back then was saying, instead of aiming for the upper torso, you aim for the lower torso, so that when the person goes down, they get they get shot. I mean, you know, it's a sad comment, but people can train for these things, good and bad. And there's a trick, you know, there's no trick to being aware of what's going on around you without making it obvious that you are looking around you to see what's going on. I know that's a redundant statement. You know, but anyway, they, you know, and I with a couple of the principals I had, they would bring me into interviews with new teachers, and I would, even though it's a department chair, and I would not be involved in the interview itself per se, but after the person had left, the principal turned to me and say, "What did you think about the person based on their body language?" And I'd give them my input based on the person's body language. Which is, you know, it's a skill people need to pick up. And there was a book that came out, I think in the 70s, maybe 60s or 70s, on that body language, and there have been other books since that time. And it's worth acquiring that understanding, because that will help you prevent a lot of situations, even with people you know, or people in the workplace or anywhere. I mean, when I was in college, I knew when my supervisor was coming in, and I knew when he was going to pull a stunt on us. He was, you know, he was known for that. One of his best ones was, you know, we'd be working away and he'd take a box of paper clips and throw them into the fan. And we'd have to duck because all this shrapnel, for lack of phrase, is coming at us. You know, never hurt anyone, but you know, if you can pick up on a person's body language, you're so much ahead of the game. And that's an important element in personal self-defense. And but again, it's a hard skill to develop. Anyhow. And is that Atemi waza? I don't know. You know, if you can read a person's body language, is that a striking take? That is a distraction, because you can tell what the person potentially might do, which should get a certain response from you.
Yeah, and I think this is all leading into I think there's a question coming up soon about my eye too.
And that's after you came.
That too, actually, both of those things. You know, Larry was just really hitting on both of those a lot, and then you too, just now. Like that idea, like you're saying, like it's not just the Atemi, but to do the Atemi, you need to have like a my eye kind of ready, and these things all fall apart if the person isn't doing the ukemi you expect, right? So like when you are in the classroom, have you ever like this was mind blowing when I was learning Aikido. I would do these Aikido things in my Aikido school with Aikido students, and it was beautiful. This thing would work great. The person would pull this way and then flop back this way and land and roll out. And, you feel really good. Like, wow, I could just throw somebody. Then I went to show that to somebody. I'm like, check out this thing I learned. And you do that to them, and they don't know that they're supposed to have those responses. So they just like stand there or take a step to the side. And then like the entire thing falls apart and you can't do it. You're like, well, wait, what? No. You have to do this when I do that. And then you start like teaching them how to fall and how to respond to what you were doing. And like Larry was saying, like that doesn't work. You need to change what you're doing. And
as Larry said, that's where your street knowledge
right.
and your own experiences. They say, I'm going to have to do something. I'm going to have to do something else to get this person to go where I want them to. As Seki said, you never fight an opponent. You always help them.
Yeah. You're never going to walk up to somebody and put them in a wrist lock.
No, it's never going to happen.
That's just not going to happen. You cannot do it. You cannot just take a person and put them in a wrist lock unless they're an Aikido student.
Yeah, they have to be doing something else, and they're not aware of what you're trying to do is what allows you to do what you're trying to do.
Right.
Yeah. I worked out with Aikido people a few times, in my life, and they would get very frustrated with me. They really would.
Yeah.
You can throw me, but you got to throw me. I'm not gonna throw myself, right? So you have to earn it. So I wasn't trying to be combative. I'm just like, okay, what? No. So they were very frustrated with me.
I think I have a student who is slowly calming down. He stands about 6 something. He studies Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and he uses so much muscle, and he does things backwards as a result. It's just my main challenge is to get him to calm down. If he calms down, he does beautifully. If he stops using muscle, does beautifully. And I think that part of this is, and I think Aikido is an excellent example, is they're in the learning process. And this maybe goes back to what you first said way at the beginning of our discussion this morning. In the learning process, there has to be cooperation between Uke and Tori so that Tori can learn the technique properly, what it feels like when it's done properly. And at least I know in Jiu-Jitsu, the Uke, the person whom the technique is being done on, can feel what the technique feels like if it's done properly. Because you need to register both of these in your mind so that when you're out on the street, you can kind of judge what you are doing. And I think the problem is in any martial arts is when you get so hung up on the, I don't want to say kata, you get so hung up on doing the techniques perfectly with a partner who's cooperating with you 110%, that when you get even with moderate resistance, Seki would have us work with moderate resistance just to see what we would do. Okay. You're totally, oh my God, what do I do? And I'll keep students in the total cooperation phase anytime they're learning a new technique. And I use the Marine slogan, slow as smooth as fast. And brown and black belts can take, until we get older, can take a lot of abuse. And I know in my younger years, I would take a lot of abuse from my students because I wanted them to realize how much pressure or what they had to do to get the technique to work with someone who is resisting them moderately, because that's where they have to be, because that gives them half a chance on the street. And that's the hard part, is getting them to that point. And as Dane, as you said at the beginning, the problem is that sometimes we learn, we're going to have this cooperative, feel good, life is happy concept over here. even though the old instructors knew that this was just the early part of this, but the people down here, because they don't know, they haven't made that connection, they can't go. They have to stick with the ideal. And this is what gets the lack of this transition, I'm sorry, is what gets them in trouble in real situations. If Larry is in a situation where he says to a perp or whatever term you want to use, a client, come with me, and the client chooses not to come with Larry, Larry has a choice of either, okay, depending on the situation, or yes, you are going to come with me, and he will do what he believes is physically necessary to do that. Okay. But what Larry does in order to get a person to come with him has to be based on his training and experience, which trains him to know how to respond if he gets resistance on this person. It isn't just Larry's going to put his hands on this person, and this person is not just going to nicely say, yes, officer, I'll come with you.
It's always easier to get cooperation, get compliance, right, than to have to fight
Sure.
with everyone every single way, right? So that's always, and the way you treat people goes a long way. The way you carry yourself,
Yes.
and I think both Dane and Sensei Kirby both alluded to this earlier. The way you carry yourself is going to prevent a ton of problems.
Yes.
Professor Kirby, just the way you're standing prevents problems. The way you hold yourself, the way you present yourself in a calm and confident manner. You start losing your cool, and people know they're getting under your skin, especially the parolee population, the predator mindset population. They're pushing your buttons and they're trying to get you upset because you're not thinking clearly, you're making a good judgment, and you're easy to manipulate physically and mentally, right? So they'll try and get your emotions going. But if you just remain calm and remain cool, you're going to show that you're really in control of that situation, and that will prevent a lot of things. The way you carry yourself, the way the way you hold yourself in uniform, what we call command presence. It's no different. Walking down the street, the same thing. I'm always scanning. My head's kind of, I'm always on a swivel, but I'm not nervous jerking around. I'm very confident when I walk down. And my stance is, and I'm never really off balance. You'd be hard pressed to really catch me off balance when I'm standing in the line at the grocery store. When I'm walking down the street, you can always move, and it's that movement that keeps you on balance, that lets you flow off of whatever comes at you. Someone slams into my shoulder, okay, I'm not going to stop you. I'm going to roll off of that. My balance is going to be distributed equally. So, that's just kind of the way you go through life after the stuff becomes, everything kind of ties in together, and it becomes more of a lifestyle, and just the way you hold yourself, you present yourself, and people, they read off on that, and they're like, no, I'm not gonna, I'm super short, I'm 5'5", and I joke that I'm 4'8", and I don't have many problems, even in the street, I didn't get challenged, I don't have problems, once in a while, right, of course. You're always going to get that one, but some people get problems all the time. I typically don't have problems, but I'm built like a fire hydrant, right? So,
No,
you guys know me. Sensei Kirby knows me. So.
No, you're not. Not in comparison to some of the fire hydrants I've had in class. You have a neck.
Not much.
No, I think your presence is so important. The image you convey. I just out of habit or dealing with, maybe, I don't know where it's starting. I tend to call people, if I don't know their name, I will call them, say like, yes, sir, or no, ma'am. And I've had people say, are you ex-military?
Oh, yeah.
That would be the most common question I get.
Absolutely.
And I'll say, no. They say, you haven't served? I said, no. They said, well, why are you saying? I say that because that's how I treat people. You treat people with respect. And it's amazing what it gets you on the positive end. But I've also when I've had to deal with gang members, kids and adults, I've also used the same approach. And it's amazing how it changes their response to me. because I'm showing, I'm showing some, I'm self-confident. If I was not confident in the situation I was in, I would not be saying, yes, sir. And they can, and I'm also extending respect to them by calling them sir. It's better than saying, yo, dude, what you doing? It isn't going to work. You can't, at least in my book, you can't use colloquialisms unless you know the person and they accept you into that quote unquote social group. And you have to, I forget, one year, one of my classes, we ended up with a discussion of, we actually had a discussion on derogatory terms that are used to identify various ethnicities. Administration would have run to the other end of the school and hidden it. But the kids handled it. I mean, we dealt with Hispanics, derogatory term. We went back to the Irish. We went to, derogatory terms that are used for Italians. In some cases, we went to hand symbols, what they meant. And I didn't get a single parent complaint. Number one, I didn't get an administrator complaint. It all depends on how you treat people and what they say. And that's such an important factor in getting anything you want in life. And it's really important on the street. Because as Larry said, if you create the illusion, whether it exists in fact or not, if you create the illusion that you are confident in yourself and you carry yourself in a manner that shows you respect yourself, and you treat the other person with respect as best as possible, that's going to change how they deal with you. And I think that's probably 75 to 90% of the game in getting what you want, is how the other person perceives you. If they don't perceive you as a victim, you're not going to be a victim, or there's a much lesser chance of you being a victim. And their whole thing, we said, their whole bunch of different kinds of body language that you can use to show you're not a victim, or and there's body language you can pick up from other people to show that they may be, you can tell who's watching you. It's attacks rarely come out of nowhere. So anyway,
that's a lot of situational awareness. And if you guys ever want, want a presentation on that, I just gave one yesterday to a bunch of faculty. If you guys want a presentation on that, by all means, hit me up. I'm happy to do it. We can do it on Zoom for you, or, I'm over here in the West Coast outside of Los Angeles with Sensei Kirby. So, use me as a resource if you want. I'm more than happy to help you out and provide that for you, for your students and for you guys. And the idea is to stay safe and avoid signs of violence, to recognize signs of violence and avoid the situation before it happens. And that's really what it's about.
I think it's worth mentioning here. Two quick points. I'll try to keep it to under 40 minutes, but I'm stealing from Larry for both of these, really. But I think too, we're talking about like all of this situational awareness. Your head's on a swivel. We're all taking things in and all that stuff. And then the concept of, well, is that paranoid? Am I being paranoid? Right? Does that result in that? And that's been kind of chugging along in the background, that question of what's the difference? Why isn't it paranoia really? What makes somebody paranoid, right? And I think exactly what makes this kind of a thing different is it's a benefit of martial arts training. We talk about this, it's for your whole life. We're always talking about that with martial arts. It's applicable to everything in your life. It's not just about the actual martial application. It's how you can apply that everywhere. Everything is a jujitsu fight, that you're going through in life. And that situational awareness is something I was just thinking about. What I was playing with my daughter the other day, and just because if I'm in Manhattan on a subway, I'm looking for threats. If I'm in a nature setting, I'm looking for birds and squirrels, and I'm looking for pretty flowers, right? Like, I'm not going to miss those things. I'm going to hear that gentle stream and go find it, and, you know, bring my daughter to that. And just showing that to her, she'll sit down and close her eyes and play a little game where I'm like, how many birds do you hear? You know, it should be like, I hear three different birds. You know, like, do you hear that squirrel over there? You know, yeah, I hear that. You know, so it's also a way to just enjoy life and to be situationally aware. Don't miss things you could be enjoying either. You know, it's not just about looking out for attacks all the time. It's also, don't miss the pleasant things. Don't miss that person who smiled nicely at you while you were walking down the street also, right? You know, you're looking for the bad guys, but
Yeah,
I think that's the important thing.
Yeah, when we talk about situational awareness, it's being observant, it's being aware of your surroundings, and being able to put a meaning to potential threat activity, right? And that's all it is. So yeah, okay, knowing what something is people will go through, their body will go through cues when they're about to do something. You know, when they're about to do something, and you have these proxemic violations, you have the kinetic leaks, you have these biometric symbols, the indicators that you can't really mask, and they'll leak out. And those are the things you want to be aware of, right? So, and it helps you give meaning to know what it is you're seeing. And I was talking to some faculty, they said, listen, we were handing out pizza to the students and blah, blah, blah. And this is what we were doing. And this one guy was really kind of creeping us out. It was hot. It was a 90-some degrees, and he's wearing a heavy clothing and a long trench coat and blah, blah, blah. And he was standing at a distance and staring at people, making everyone feel really uneasy. And, you know, my first thought, did you call security? Well, no, I didn't know what to say. Well, did you call 911? Well, no, I wouldn't call them either. I wouldn't know what to tell them. Well, yeah, but you knew something was wrong. So why aren't you be able, you know, this was faculty. They're educated professionals that are used to presenting to people all the time, and communication is their strong point, right? So, you know, it's their sarcasm. So, you know, they couldn't even call security to let them know, hey, we got a guy over here who's making us feel uncomfortable. You know, why? What was he doing? What was he wearing? What was his body stance? What was his language, right? And those are all the things that the skill sets that situational awareness kind of, and it's really nothing more than common sense, right? It's just being able to teach you how to articulate that and explain it. Is identify what you're looking at and what it is you're seeing. All right, guys, we're over the limit, so I gotta get going. I hate to leave early on the group, especially in a good discussion. So we will be in touch. Take care.
I actually have to get going too, and so, you know, I've got some notes written down, and I will hopefully get this out early next week. And I have to take our dogs to get their baths and rearrange the new refrigerator again. You have no idea how difficult it is to arrange things in a new refrigerator. when the refrigerator is significantly different from the one you used to have. You know? Anyway, I want to thank all of you, and have a good. I apologize for messing up on the link, and I want to thank you guys for making it. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. I'm probably going to go for the 2nd and 4th week in May, because the 3rd week in May is Mother's Day on Sunday, and some of you may be wanting to be elsewhere that weekend. And so I don't want to, you know, I don't want you to get your moms upset with you.
The ultimate sensei.
Yeah, pardon?
The ultimate sensei. You don't want to get in trouble there.
Right. Or your spouses.
Yep. Either way.
Thank you all. I enjoyed it. Learned a lot.
That's called situational awareness. Anyway, have a great week.
Bye, guys. See you next time.
Take care.